everyone. I'm Alma Angeles. This is NET25 World News, and on tonight's top stories. Tensions escalate on multiple fronts around the globe. In Moscow, a bold declaration from Vladimir Putin as Russia flexes its military muscle. The Russian leader announces combat testing will continue for their advanced Orishnik hypersonic missile, a weapon Ukraine is now raising to counter.
I propose to consider the decision made that mass production of this missile will be launched and it will be supplied to our strategic missile forces.
In Asia, North Korea raises the temperature, issuing a stark warning over joint military exercises between the U.S. and its allies. And as the world grapples with climate challenges, chaos erupts at the UN Climate Summit in Baku, where a controversial financing proposal has left delegates deeply divided as time runs out.
Forgive me, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm really sorry to say, but the text we now have in front of us, in our view, is imbalanced, unworkable, and unacceptable. Could I please urge you to step up the leadership? Thank you.
This is a big step back, and it is not acceptable.
These stories and more as we bring you tonight's top developments from around the world. The news starts now. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Russia will continue testing its Orishnik hypersonic missile in combat, with a supply already available for use. In response, Ukraine announced it's developing air defense systems to neutralize the weapon's threat. Putin's comments followed the missile's first deployment into Ukraine, which he claimed was a reaction to Ukraine's use of U.S. ballistic missiles and British cruise missiles against Russian targets.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday that Russia would keep testing its new hypersonic missile in combat and has a stockpile of them at the ready. Putin spoke a day after Russia fired the new Orishnik missile into Ukraine for the first time. This CCTV footage shows flashes over the Ukrainian city of Dnipro after Russia said it fired the hypersonic medium-range missile.
The Orishnik missile system is not just an effective hypersonic weapon. Its strike capabilities, especially when used massively and in combination with other long-range weapons that Russia possesses, allow to inflict damage on enemy facilities comparable to strategic weapons. Even though Orishnik is not a strategic type of weapons, it's not an ICBM, it is not a weapon of mass destruction, essentially because it is a high-precision weapon. And as I mentioned, there are no means to intercept and effectively counter such missiles in the world. And we will continue to conduct tests of this system. We need to establish serial production of this system, and I propose to consider the decision made that mass production of this missile will be launched and it will be supplied to our strategic missile forces.
He said the step was prompted by Ukraine's use of U.S. ballistic missiles and British cruise missiles to hit Russia.
It is not Russia, but the United States who have destroyed the system of international security. And they are trying to preserve their hegemony and stoking a global conflict. We have always preferred, and we still prefer, to resolve our disagreements using peaceful means, but we are prepared for any scenario, and if anyone has any doubts, they shouldn't. There will always be a response.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kyiv was working with Western partners to work out systems to counter, quote, new risks. He described Russia's use of the new missile as an escalation. While Russia said more tests would follow, a U.S. official said the weapon is experimental and that Russia has a limited number of them. RAND Corporation engineer and analyst Michael Bonnert.
In many ways, this is Putin acting out because he feels vulnerable. And this is one of the few ways left that he can demonstrate concern while trying to look strong at the same time.
A lot of people are calling this an escalation, but really this is just for psychological impact by President Putin. It's trying to deter the West and the backers of Ukraine from continuing to support Ukraine in the way they have done up until now. This is a weapon with very little military utility, and it's not even particularly useful for Russia's secondary aims of killing civilians in Ukraine and destroying their homes. Instead, it's a demonstration, and of course it's backed up with these threats by Putin that those countries helping Ukraine could find themselves targeted as well in the future. So really how this plays depends on how the West is going to respond to Putin's threats. De-escalation as ever would be the most dangerous possible response because it would show to Russia once again that these threats work and encourage more of them in the future. The very last thing that Russia wants is to confront a united NATO. It makes no sense at all to attack a NATO member with weapons, an undeniable armed attack in the sense of the North Atlantic Treaty, while the United States is still committed to that treaty.
Moscow says that by giving the green light for Ukraine to fire Western missiles deep inside Russia, the U.S. and its allies are entering into direct conflict with Russia. On Tuesday, Putin approved policy changes that lowered the threshold for Russia to use nuclear weapons in response to an attack with conventional ones.
Russia's recent launch of a newly developed ballistic missile aimed at Ukraine signals a growing global arms race. And that is according to arms expert Alexander Graf.
I think it shows that Russia has been working on a conventional intermediate range ballistic missile, a missile system that was not known, at least not for people outside of government. And there has been much speculation since yesterday what kind of missile it could be until President Putin revealed the culprit. And so I think we should be worried in the sense that this simply shows that we are in the midst of an arms race concerning different kinds of missiles, not only in Europe, but globally. And the problem in Europe with these kind of missiles, I think, is also reflected in Asia, where this process has already been going on for quite some time.
The missile, named the Oreshnik or hazel tree, marks a significant escalation. And Graf says the launch was a political signal from President Putin, warning the West not to send more weapons to Ukraine.
But I think, generally speaking, it was a political signal, more so than a military one right away, because we know that Russia informed shortly before the Americans about the fact that they would launch a weapon via the different channels they have through the nuclear risk reduction centers. And so it's clear that Putin wanted to show this is our red line. Don't go further. Don't deliver more weapons of similar categories to Ukraine and allowing them to strike our territory. So basically, I think he tried to escalate in a way to de-escalate, but we have to see whether this kind of Russian logic will work in the case of the war against Ukraine.
This missile attack comes after Kiev struck Russian targets using U.S.-made and British-made missiles, an act approved by the U.S. earlier this week.
Well, I think that the respective authorities and the intelligence services, they certainly knew that Russia has been working on that kind of missile. Otherwise, we would have not been able to identify it now. But this said, for example, Germany announced some time ago that it would acquire so-called Arrow 3 anti-ballistic missile systems. And there has always been discussions about why this kind of systems, because they are directed exactly against intermediate range ballistic missiles. And at that point, everyone knew, or at least was not aware, of the fact that Russia has these kind of missiles. And now it makes sense, right? Because this defense system is directed exactly at that class of missiles that Russia now used against Ukraine. And so I think along these lines, European states will invest further in ballistic missile defense systems, probably not so much in intermediate range ballistic missiles themselves, because that's a difficult technology and there's not much experience in Europe with that. But certainly the United States, as has already announced, are going to move forward also with placing certain missile systems, cruise missiles, but also ballistic missiles, and maybe hypersonic missiles in Europe, particularly in Germany, as it has been discussed for the last months, since Germany and the United States agreed in the context of the NATO summit in summer to place such missiles in Germany from 2026 onwards.
Graf explains that Russia's missile launch is a warning against any further Western support for Ukraine. As tensions mount, Graf underscores that both sides, Russia and the West, have starkly different interests. He warns that the situation in Ukraine risks escalating into something far more dangerous.
Well, I think people should be worried. They're right to worry. I mean, we are in a very difficult situation. And certainly the escalatory cycle, if you want, is moving on. We see this now. Things have happened that were unimaginable 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Europe. So there's certainly reason to worry. The decision or the renewal of the nuclear doctrine in Russia, I think also, of course, happened in the context of this war. But it is a signaling device, right, to tell the West, all right, these are our red lines. We want to reestablish deterrence. Don't move forward. Don't support Ukraine. But the matter of the fact is that both sides, Russia in this case and the West, have simply very different contradicting interests. And so we have to walk a thin line between, on the one hand, making sure Ukraine gets supported and survives as a state, and on the other hand, not risking a war potentially catastrophic between NATO and Russia.
As the world watches, experts warn that this arms race could take us down a dangerous path. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is ramping up his rhetoric against the U.S., accusing Washington of escalating tensions to unprecedented levels. According to state media, Kim warned on Friday that the Korean Peninsula is facing the greatest risk of nuclear conflict in its history. Speaking at a military exhibition in Pyongyang, Kim criticized past negotiations with the U.S., calling them proof of what he described as America's aggressive and hostile stance toward North Korea. And this comes years after his historic meetings with then-President Donald Trump in Singapore, Hanoi, and the Korean border. Despite the headlines, those talks produced no tangible results. Kim used the event, known as the Defense Development Exhibition, to emphasize the need for ultra-modern weaponry, vowing to keep enhancing North Korea's defense capabilities to secure its strategic position. The timing of Kim's speech is notable as international scrutiny grows over his deepening military ties with Moscow. Reports indicate North Korea has already sent over 10,000 troops to aid Russia in its war against Ukraine, further straining global tensions. North Korea has denounced recent military drills conducted by the U.S., South Korea, and Japan, issuing a warning of immediate action if necessary to defend its sovereignty. The three nations carried out a 3-day joint exercise called Freedom Edge last week, featuring fighter jets, maritime patrol aircraft, and the U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS George Washington. In a statement released through state media KCNA, North Korea's defense ministry cautioned, and I quote, "We strongly warn the U.S. and its allies hostile to the DPRK to cease provocative actions that heighten instability and risk pushing the Korean Peninsula into armed conflict." The ministry emphasized that North Korea's military is prepared to take immediate measures to manage risks preemptively while monitoring U.S. and allied military activities closely. U.S. Secretary of State Defense Lloyd said a strong partnership with Fiji is critical for a free Indo-Pacific today, saying the region was a priority for Washington.
I'm very proud to be the first U.S. Secretary of Defense to ever visit Fiji. It's an honor to be here. Our relationship is rooted in common values and our shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. You know, the Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and strengthening our partnerships with Fiji and other Pacific Island countries is vital to a free and open Indo-Pacific.
In a joint press conference with Fiji's Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, Austin announced an agreement for logistics cooperation between their forces, and it includes $4.9 million in military financing pending U.S. Congress approval.
We discussed how we're deepening our bilateral cooperation, and this includes a new acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, and I'll sign that agreement with the Ministry for Home Affairs and Immigration later today. This agreement will mean closer logistics cooperation between our forces, including for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. We're also announcing the start of negotiations on a Status of Forces Agreement, or SOFA. Once complete, the SOFA will expand our bilateral defense cooperation through increased exercises and military-to-military engagements.
Fiji has benefited greatly from the U.S.-Fiji defense relationship through many programs and joint collaborations that has enabled us to protect our borders and marine resources, and has assisted us in tackling transnational crimes.
Austin is on a tour of the Indo-Pacific, where he seeks to strengthen ties between nations in the region and the U.S., seeing stops in the Philippines and Australia. Austin's visit to the region comes as China builds its influence in the Pacific. China and the nearby Solomon Islands have signed a security pact, sparking concerns among some Western allied nations. The defense partnership between the Philippines and Japan took another step forward as their top defense leaders met to discuss deeper collaboration. Department of National Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. sat down with Japanese Defense Minister Nakatani during the 18th ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, or ADMM, and the 11th ADMM Plus in Vientiane, Laos. According to DND spokesperson Assistant Secretary Arsenio Andolong, the meeting helped reinforce the growing defense ties between the two nations. Teodoro expressed confidence that the partnership will continue to flourish under Nakatani's leadership. Teodoro emphasized the importance of stronger defense industry cooperation, including joint production and technology transfers. And this comes after the recent signing of the Self-Reliant Defense Posture Revitalization Act. He also highlighted the importance of working together with like-minded partners to promote peace and security. As part of the discussions, Teodoro invited Minister Nakatani to visit the Philippines next year. Nakatani, for his part, expressed optimism about the future of the Japan-Philippines defense ties, underlining the robust and enduring nature of the partnership. The 18th ADMM, which began on November 20, is centered on the theme ASEAN Together for Peace, Security, and Resilience. Dangerous weather is wreaking havoc across the U.S. just as millions of Americans gear up for the Thanksgiving travel rush. From the West Coast to the Northwest, powerful storms are slamming the country with heavy rains, snow, and treacherous conditions. And there's more trouble brewing. A storm is heading for the Midwest right around the holiday. Now take a look at this satellite image showing a massive storm system sweeping across the Midwest, now dumping snow from the mountains of West Virginia and Maryland to Pennsylvania and upstate New York. The big question, what does this mean for the estimated 80 million Americans traveling for Thanksgiving? A record number. In California, heavy rains continue to pound the West Coast, flooding farmland and causing rivers and creeks to overflow. Santa Rosa experienced over 12 inches of rainfall in the past 72 hours, marking its wettest day in over 25 years.
It wasn't too high. That side was a lake, but it wasn't like fully in the middle yet. It had just, like, it was flowing over just enough to where it was in the road, but not like deep. And then I woke up this morning and it was just raised up.
The relentless rain is causing significant concerns for residents.
My biggest fear is that these are going to wash away. we're renters here, thank goodness, so it's not our financial concern, but it does put us in a position of where do we go?
This is the most rain I've seen since I've been here. These creeks are up. I expected them to be up like this, but yeah, it's just been nonstop rain.
In the Northeast, winter has officially arrived. Heavy snowfall blanketed Pennsylvania and upstate New York, with some areas seeing over a foot of snow. Western Pennsylvania was buried under 6 to 12 inches of snow overnight, leading to treacherous road conditions and widespread closures. Meanwhile, New Jersey's High Point recorded a staggering 20 inches. The snowfall brought everything from school closures to iconic moments. During last night's Cleveland Browns-Steelers game, fans witnessed near whiteout conditions as snow fell almost an inch per hour. With storms sweeping across the country, all eyes are now on the Midwest. Meteorologists warn of worsening conditions as the storm intensifies, potentially disrupting plans for millions. For Northern California, the end of the atmospheric river can't come soon enough. Though the heaviest rain is expected to taper off soon, intermittent downpours will persist through the weekend, leaving wary residents anxiously awaiting clear skies. As holiday travelers hit the road, the weather's unpredictable nature adds one more challenge to an already record-breaking Thanksgiving travel season. Rescue and relief efforts intensify in typhoon-ravaged Nueva Vizcaya as President Marcos Jr. personally spearheads aid distribution to thousands affected by the recent triple typhoon devastation. In a hands-on display of government response, President Marcos released a massive 50 million peso aid package to Nueva Vizcaya, one of the hardest-hit provinces by typhoons, Nika, Ophel, and Pepito. Now, from the bustling Bambang Auditorium, the President oversaw the distribution of critical assistance, including 5,000 pesos in emergency cash aid to 500 residents through the DSWD's Crisis Assistance Program. But that's not all. 1,000 boxes of essential family food packs are now making their way to evacuation centers across the province.
Hindi lang ang NDRMC para sa disaster response. Kami, ang aming ginagawa, tawag namin is whole of government approach, yung buong pamahalaan. Hindi lamang isang departamento, hindi lamang 2 departamento, kundi ang buong pamahalaan para sa pagdala ng tulong para sa ating mga kababayan na nangangailangan, na naging biktima dito sa mga disaster. Kaya po, ay kung titignan po ninyo, marami pong galing sa iba't ibang ahensya at huwag po natin makakalimutan ang ating mga private sector na tumutulong. Hindi po kami titigil. Gagawin namin, hindi po mauubos ito. Huwag kayo mag-alala. Kahit na sunod-sunod yung bagyo, meron naman tayo, kagaya ng aking sinabi, meron naman tayong pagkukuhanan at tuloy-tuloy ang ating pag-produce nitong mga relief goods. At tuloy-tuloy naman, hanggat may request, ay tuloy-tuloy pa ang aming pagbigay.
A tragic warning for young travelers as a backpacker's paradise turns deadly. 6 tourists, including 2 Australian teenagers, have died in what authorities suspect is a mass methanol poisoning in Laos. They were just like thousands of other young backpackers chasing adventure in Southeast Asia. 19-year-old Bianca Jones and Holly Bowles, best friends from Australia, had saved up for what was meant to be the trip of a lifetime. But their journey came to a tragic end in the riverside town of Vang Vieng, Laos. Within days of checking into the popular Nana Backpacker Hostel, both teenagers were fighting for their lives in Thai hospitals. Jones passed away on November 21st, Bowles just a day later. They weren't alone. A 28-year-old British woman, Simone White, also lost her life, along with 2 Danish women and an American man. Police are now conducting a transnational investigation, focusing on the hostel where some victims reportedly received complimentary drinks before heading out. While the hostel manager, now in police custody, denies any wrongdoing, claiming hundreds of other guests drank the same beverages without incident. Authorities are racing to prevent more casualties in what appears to be one of the region's deadliest methanol poisoning incidents.
We've received the very sad confirmation from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade that tragically Bianca Jones has lost her life. Our first thoughts in this moment are with her family and friends who are grieving a terrible and cruel loss. This is every parent's very worst fear and a nightmare that no one should have to endure.
Division and discontent spilled into the open on Thursday at a UN climate summit in Baku, sparked by a proposal for a new global finance deal, which offered two vastly different options and left no one happy as the closing deadline neared. The key goal of the COP29 is to agree how much money richer developed countries should provide poorer developing ones to help them fight climate change, a critical plank in efforts to limit the damage caused by rising global temperatures. But getting a deal on the money has proved slow going at the talks in Azerbaijan's capital, and the latest draft of the negotiating text arrived several hours behind schedule as delegates entered, in theory, the closing 48 hours.
We finally have an initial number on the table from the developing countries of $250 billion, which is a goal for 2035, up from the current $100 billion that they are providing. Yeah, $250 billion is not what's needed in the context of clear agreement that we need $1.3 trillion for the developing country share of external finance. The U.S., obviously under Trump, if he pulls out of the Paris Agreement on day one, as he said he will do, will not be part of that $250 billion, at least for the next 4 years. Now, the goal is a 2035 goal. One thing we know, there will be a new U.S. president in 2029, less than halfway through this period, and we don't obviously know who that's going to be. It could be someone with a very similar view to President-elect Trump, or it could be someone more in line with Presidents Obama and Biden, which would get us back into Paris and start contributing. So, but for right now, you have to assume the U.S. is off the playing field for the next 4 years.
The developed countries are offering $250 billion when developing countries need trillions. It's like bringing a garden hose into a wildfire. It is outrageously inadequate, the climate crisis that we are facing. We need fire trucks. We don't need buckets of water.
Forgive me, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm really sorry to say, but the text we now have in front of us, in our view, is imbalanced, unworkable, and unacceptable. Could I please urge you to step up the leadership? Thank you.
This is a big step back, and it is not acceptable.
You don't want to be pointing fingers, but we all know that there has been a backsliding.
Divisions and anger spilled into the open at COP29 on Thursday as the closing deadline neared.
Taking back the language and taking back the commitment.
No one was happy with the draft deal that offered two opposing versions, reflecting the positions of richer and poorer countries. UN Chief Antonio Guterres was at the talks in Baku, Azerbaijan.
What now matters is how to find a compromise that allows for an ambitious result in relation to the new global goal. Failure is not an option.
Activists at the UN summit demanded richer countries pay up. Developing countries need at least $1 trillion a year by the end of the decade to cope with climate change, economists told the talks last week. But the draft deal states no figure for total funds countries would aim to invest each year, leaving a space marked X. Key details remain undecided: what counts towards the annual figure, who pays, and how much. With the summit set to wrap up on Friday but widely expected to overrun. Harjeet Singh of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative.
No deal is better than a bad deal. That is absolutely clear. If we go with a bad deal, it's not going to provide any support to developing countries to have an ambitious action, which means that we are all going to be suffering. Everybody is going to suffer if we fail at this COP.
The European Union's Climate Commissioner, Wopke Hoekstra, urged more leadership from COP29 President Azerbaijan, which takes control of negotiations in the final days and compiled the texts.
As for the text overall, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is clearly unacceptable as it stands now.
Some negotiators also said Thursday's proposals failed to uphold a pledge made at last year's Dubai summit to transition away from fossil fuels, hailed at the time as a landmark moment. Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev hit out at Western critics of his country's oil and gas industry describing such resources as a gift from God.
London's Gatwick Airport was thrown into chaos after a security incident prompted the evacuation of a large part of its south terminal. The airport, which is located about 30 miles south of London, is Britain's second busiest. It started when police discovered a suspicious item in a piece of luggage. Social media videos showed crowds of frustrated passengers waiting outside the terminal as authorities worked to resolve the situation. The British police sent a bomb disposal team to the scene after a suspected prohibited item was found in a piece of luggage. We are keeping passengers out of the terminal building while this incident is ongoing, airport officials said on X. Authorities also warned of significant traffic disruptions around the area and urged people to avoid it. The evacuation caused widespread delays, with most flights departing from the south terminal delayed by 1 to 5 hours. In addition to flight delays, some arrivals are expected to be delayed by up to 4 hours. The disruption even led to 2 flights from Barcelona and a flight from Seville being sent back to their departure points. Passengers are advised to check their travel insurance policies to see if they're eligible for refunds in case they choose not to fly, though it's unclear at this stage whether airlines will issue refunds. With road traffic and rail networks severely congested, the disruptions has spilled over into external transport services. More than 600 flights were due to take off or land at Gatwick on Friday, affecting over 121,000 passengers, according to aviation analytics firm Cirium. As the situation unfolds, passengers are urged to check with their airlines for updates. In a separate incident earlier, London police carried out a controlled explosion near the U.S. Embassy in South London after discovering a suspect package. We can confirm that the loud bang reported in the area a short time ago was a controlled explosion carried out by officers. London's Metropolitan Police said on X. Inquiries are still ongoing and cordons will remain in place for the time being. The police force said in an earlier post that it was investigating a suspect package in the area close to the south bank of the River Thames, adding that they were aware of speculation about the incident online. The U.S. moved its embassy from Mayfair, central London, to a 12-story purpose-built glass cube in 9 Elms in 2018, partly for safety reasons. Now, police later said they believed it was a hoax. Brazil's federal police are turning up the heat on former President Jair Bolsonaro. They formally accused him, along with 36 others, of plotting to overturn the 2022 election results after his loss to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
Brazil's federal police formally accused former President Jair Bolsonaro of his role in an alleged 2022 coup conspiracy, according to a statement on Thursday. Police said 36 other people were also accused, including Bolsonaro's 2022 running mate. Bolsonaro lost the election to rival Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The final police report caps a nearly 2-year investigation into Bolsonaro's role in the election-denying movement, which culminated in January 2023 with his supporters sweeping the capital Brasilia. Many protesters said they had wanted to create chaos to justify a military coup. One police source told Reuters that the investigation points to Bolsonaro as a key player in the conspiracy. They will seek to hold him criminally responsible for attempting to violently overthrow democratic rule. On social media, Bolsonaro said investigators and the Supreme Court judge had been creative and done everything the law does not say. His lawyer told Reuters he would wait to see the report before commenting. The formal police accusations are a fresh blow to Bolsonaro's plans to run for president in 2026. His allies are trying to overturn a court decision blocking him from public office until 2030 over his conduct. Separately on Tuesday, police arrested 5 people suspected of involvement in a plot that included assassinating Lula just days before he took office. Lula spoke about the attempted poisoning for the first time on Thursday.
I can assure you that I am a man who has much more to be thankful for because I am alive. The attempt to poison me in Alkmaar did not work, and we are still here.
CNN Brazil reported on Thursday that police have concluded Bolsonaro had, quote, full knowledge of a plot to kill then-President-elect Lula da Silva in 2022 before he took office. The Prosecutor General's office will decide if and when to press charges against Bolsonaro and the 36 accused.
There was a wave of excitement amongst cryptocurrency investors in Indonesia as the price of Bitcoin neared the $100,000 mark. Tourists were seen gathered in front of cryptocurrency-themed cafes and workspaces, with one woman saying her portfolio had doubled in value.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see that Bitcoin growing and everything growing, so my portfolio becomes like twice bigger and I can meditate, can do my things, and money growing, even though I have less than one Bitcoin and possible to buy not whole Bitcoin at once but partially, so I can increase my portfolio doing nothing for now. Yeah.
Now on Thursday, Bitcoin briefly touched $99,073. It has more than doubled in value this year and is up about 45% since Trump's sweeping election victory on November 5, which has also seen a slew of pro-crypto lawmakers being elected to Congress. And as Bitcoin approached $100,000, stall holders in a South London market say accepting the cryptocurrency has led to extra sales.
It's huge. I think psychologically it's big as well for people to see it at that price, because having been in Bitcoin for a long time, we've been talking about 100,000 for a long time, but to see it nearly there, it's quite incredible.
It's extra sales, it's incremental sales, that's true incremental sales. It's sales that we wouldn't have had before, because the Bitcoiners hunt you out. They want somewhere to spend their Bitcoin. So we thought, let's give it a go, why not?
I think there is a chance that it gains traction faster than people think with the current United States administration that's coming in January, because it is a big talking point in the US. They are talking, and whether it happens or not, about having a US strategic reserve.
But it's all about trust. It comes down to trust. And which currency do you trust more? And for me, I trust Bitcoin way more than I trust the Great British Pound.
René Magritte's L'Empire des Lumières sold at an auction for over $121 million, bringing the Belgian painter into a prestigious group of artists whose works have sold for nine-figure sums. Depicting a dark nocturnal street under a bright daytime sky, the 1954 surrealist work confounds and beguiles in equal measures, according to auction house Christie's. With an estimated price tag of at least $95 million, the painting had been expected to set a record for a work by Magritte, but the final sale at $121,160,000 exceeded even those expectations. And a banana duct taped to a wall, a conceptual piece titled Comedian by Mauricio Catalan, fetched $6.2 million at auction in Sotheby's. Now originally estimated to sell for up to $1.5 million, the piece attracted bids from 7 contenders before finally being hammered down for $5.2 million. With fees included, the final total reached $6.2 million. According to the auction house, the winning bid was placed on behalf of Justin Sun, a Chinese collector and founder of the cryptocurrency platform Tron. Claude Monet's Nympheus netted $59 million during Sotheby's Autumn Art Sale in New York City. The 17-minute bidding started at $40 million before landing at $59 million, $65.5 million with fees. The painting was part of the collection of late beauty industry entrepreneur Seidel Miller. This was the first time the piece had come up for auction.
To 17, of course, at the famous Giverny Gardens outside of Paris.
And a portrait of the French poet Arthur Rambo, drawn by fellow poet Paul Verlaine and never before exhibited in its original form, will be up for auction at Drouot Auction House in Paris on December 2nd. The drawing depicting Rambo smoking a pipe is one of the 17th century poet's best-known images, having been chosen by Verlaine as the front cover of Rambo's complete poems, but the original had never been shown in public. Now, this piece belonged to the former director of the Claude Monet Foundation, Hugues Gall, and was hung in his office in Giverny outside Paris. The drawing is estimated to be sold for 100,000 to 200,000 euros. And the portrait was dated 1872, but the inscription from memory on the drawing indicates that Verlaine painted it later. The two well-known French poets who met in 1871 had a tumultuous love affair, with Verlaine trying to kill Rambo by shooting him. The revolver used by Verlaine to try to kill Rambo in 1873 was sold at auction in Paris in 2016, fetching 434,500 euros. And the Sursock Museum, one of Lebanon's few modern and contemporary art museums, sealed its main collection in the basement as clashes between Israel and Hezbollah intensified. Opened in 1961, Sursock has weathered multiple crises, including Lebanon's civil war from 1975 to 1990, and two subsequent closures in the 2000s.
We decided to take down the collection a little bit over a month and a half ago. That's when the pagers incident happened. The security concerns were getting a little bit too overwhelming with the sonic booms and risk of bombardment elsewhere. So we took down the collection to the basement where they're kept safely because of safety concerns. Some of them are on loan, so we're contractually obliged to take them down. Otherwise, we took them down just to refresh our programming so that when we reopen, we have something fresh to give to the audience. And just to for the safety of our staff as well, because some of them are displaced, some of them are not coming to work all the time, they're working remote. So the museum is working on a different program while we're closed to the public.
The museum's basement storage, built during a previous renovation, now has the capacity to house the entire collection to protect it from the threat of bombings. Originally home to over 1,600 works of art, the museum's walls now stand bare, their art labels marking empty spaces amid escalating threats of airstrikes in Beirut. And finally, in our news, the race to harness artificial intelligence is reshaping our world, from the depths of our oceans to the highest levels of global diplomacy. Tonight, we bring you AI Weekly, where geopolitics meets innovation in the tech sphere. Take a look.
From a warning about artificial intelligence from China's president to how bots could keep British wind turbines turning, this is AI Weekly. Chinese President Xi Jinping is warning AI should not be a, quote, game of rich countries and the wealthy. He made the comment at the G20 summit in Brazil, according to a report by state news agency Xinhua. It said Xi also called for more international governance and cooperation on AI. At a separate meeting in Peru, he and U.S. President Joe Biden agreed human beings, and not AI, should make decisions about the use of nuclear weapons, according to the White House. OpenAI says it wants to demystify AI and prompt engineering for teachers. It's launching a free training course for teachers along with nonprofit partner Common Sense Media. OpenAI's ChatGPT bot was launched 2 years ago, but teachers were caught off guard when they realized it could help with cheating and plagiarism. OpenAI has been trying to highlight the positive role its bot can have in education. The European Central Bank says it's wary of investors getting carried away with stocks related to AI. It warned a bubble could suddenly burst if rosy market expectations aren't met. The central bank for the 20 countries that share the euro said the stock market, particularly in the US, had become more dependent on a handful of companies seen as beneficiaries of the AI boom. And underwater robots powered by AI could keep wind turbines turning off the British coast. The country has thousands of offshore turbines. A $1.7 million project called Unite aims to get autonomous underwater robots doing precise work, such as identifying parts that need maintenance, even in turbulent seas. If successful, the system could deliver data insights in as little as 3 hours, far quicker than the current industry standard of 3 weeks.
NET25, your trusted source for global news, keeping you informed every day. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back on Monday. Good night.